I'm taking a moment to just look at the gallery view and to just see so many faces of people that I know, and how wonderful it is to see your faces, and at least in 2D, and one day hopefully soon in 3D, that we'll be able to see each other. And it warms my heart to see all of your faces here, and for a lot of people who I've never seen before, which is just absolutely fantastic, which is great. Probably because you're connected to an interfaith community here in Charlotte, or someplace else. So we're just glad to have you here, and are thankful that you are here for this year's comparative religion series. I'm going to invite my friend and colleague, Reverend Ladane Pulaski, to introduce our speakers this evening.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again. I am super excited about tonight. The first two nights have been wonderful. I found myself all week quoting the people or person that we had on Tuesday night, and I expect tonight will be much the same. I've got my own little notebook to take notes, so I think we're in for a treat tonight. We have two speakers tonight, and helping us to focus on healing of the body. Rabbi Miriam Klotz is a Senior Program Director of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and a major figure in yoga and embodied practice for decades. And I have only met her just tonight, but Rabbi Knight has studied with her and just sings her praises. So I know that we're in for a treat hearing from her. And then also a local speaker, Reverend Kathy Hasty, who is also just wonderful. Kathy has done, she's done lots of things, but unlike those people who do lots of things, that the whole jack of all trades, master of none, Kathy really seems to me to be a master of all of them. And so she's an ordained minister, she's a board certified chaplain, she's a chaplain educator, she's a psychotherapist, she's a writer, she's an artist. We're Facebook friends, and I can tell you that her art is really quite lovely and amazing. So as far as I can tell, she does all things well. So I think that having the two of them together tonight is going to be a wonderful treat, and I am looking forward to it. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
We'll begin this evening with Reverend Hasty, and just as a reminder too, you can ask your questions into the chat box by at Ask Me a Question, or to pose it to everyone, and we will take those questions and then use them later on for a little later on for the conversation part. So Reverend Hasty, thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I am excited. This is one of my very favorite topics. The healing of the body is just fascinating. Before I was the other things, I have a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and I was a registered nurse. And all through my theological education, I was a registered nurse in the intensive care units at Duke University Medical Center. I was graduated, I was ordained, and then I was a pediatric ICU nurse for a year. So my theology kind of had to crunch up against being a pediatric ICU nurse, being an ICU nurse. And so the body, and the whole idea of how we heal the body is what called me into ministry. So Rabbi Asher was saying something about if you don't use the time, and I was like, oh wait a minute, believe me, I'll use every minute because this topic is so fascinating to me, and I could go on forever. So, you're going to have to stop me probably. But to begin, what I want to do first is for us to get in our bodies and in the present moment. If there's anything I know about healing the body, it is how much we neglect just to center ourselves and pay attention in a respectful and honoring way. So if you could join me, and I'm not sure if I'm doing this for you or me, so let's just be real. It always helps me to start with some kind of grounding event. So let's, if it feels comfortable to close your eyes, that is fine. If it doesn't, just to kind of like focus on anything in the room that, just feels comforting to you. And then begin to pay attention to your breath and breathe in and out through your nose, just slowly for a couple of moments. And now take a moment to check in around your eyes and try to relax the orbits of your eyes. A lot of times when I first started doing this, I didn't know I had orbits. I didn't know I had lids. But if you'll pay attention, sometimes we carry some pressure around our eyes. And now soften around your lips. Just allow your mouth to let your tongue just drop where it wants to go, and your jaw. And pay attention to when you notice that you carry stress in your jaw, your eyes, your face, your mouth. And come down into your neck and your shoulders. Allow your shoulders to drop. And just feel some sense of peace and relaxation. And through your chest and your tummy, your pelvis. And relax the large muscle of your legs and the rest of your legs. And then feel the ground. If you're sitting, feel the ground just underneath your feet. And just allow yourself to feel a sense of being connected to the ground. Take a deep breath. And just come back to us. And so from that relaxed state, I would like to invite you that if anything begins to get you above about a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10, that you just shut the sound off. It's wonderful. You can just kind of like allow yourself to come back, because what I believe about healing the body is we heal when we're not over about a 4 out of a scale of 1 to 10. And so allow yourself just to feel a sense of being in your body and relaxed as we begin to get started. Because I do think healing the body, both individual and corporate, is about attending to our needs in this wonderful creation. That a lot of things that we do for a body are easy to do and they're easy not to do. So they're kind of like quote unquote common sense, such as getting sleep and getting some movement in your life and doing something creative and connecting with somebody you love and having a sense of God in your life, some kind of spirituality. And that is not just true of the individual body, but the corporate body, that somehow if we can attend to needs, we will be better off. And that it's not easy to learn to listen to your body. I don't think that Christianity has a great track record here, by the way, and I'm going to talk more about that. But second, I have to begin with the recognition that this is Black History Month. In the year of the movement of Black Lives Matter, it's been a hard year. And if talking about Black Lives Matter and Black History Month is somehow offensive, send me a personal email and we'll talk. Because I think we have to admit that our personal bodies and our corporate body has been so affected by racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, the oppression of bodies. You know, the whole white body supremacy has got to come into the healing of the body. It's just got to. And frankly, the history of Christianity and the healing of the body and oppression, you know, we don't have a great track record, y'all. We just don't. We've made a lot of mistakes. I do want to say that I see the difference between wellness and illness as the difference between we and I. That we will never be well alone. And in order to kind of organize my thoughts, because I have a lot of thoughts about this, I've decided to do the Christian thing and make up a bad anagram. The true thing, if you want to know what Christian sermon is, always got to have a bad anagram in it. So the bad anagram for tonight will be heal. And I'm gonna make my talk like crunched into a bad anagram. So the very first thing I think about healing both the individual and the corporate body, I would have to come back to hope. If we don't have hope for one another, we cannot be a source of healing. So often I have said that, and so I teach psychotherapy and I teach chaplains, right? So I'm always teaching about something called countertransference. So what that means is when I have an illusion about you that I act on, that's out of my history, that really has nothing to do with you, a distortion, right? We all know about that. Well, if I am hopeless about you, inevitably it's countertransference. It's out of my history, it's not yours. And I'm expecting myself to be able to heal you in some way or something. I'm expecting you to meet my needs. And that's not going to happen. So when we have hope for another, it's not this kind of specific hope. It's more of a sense of, I don't know the future. And I don't know your future. I don't really know your complete past. And so I have to have a sense that you probably know better than I do what you need. And I got to tune into that and amplify your, kind of what could happen in your life. I just see people go into situations and try to be helpful. And the minute their own despair or hopelessness gets touched, they end up trying to fix, which in some ways is evidence of hopelessness. Hope, to me, for healing, lives with the unknown. There's something called negative capacity in teaching psychotherapy. We talk about negative capacity, and that's the capacity to not know, to live with uncertainty. And haven't we had to do that this year? Maybe we are meant to increase our tolerance for uncertainty in this year. And to do that, I think we can be better sources of hope for other people. Okay, so the second one of my bad anagram, I'm going to say, is equity. So in healing, there is, and this year, wow, we've had a lot of inequity. There's been inequity in suffering. So I've seen families who have lost like 4 or 5 family members who've died. It breaks my heart to see the amount of suffering that people have had. And this suffering is not equally distributed in any sense of the word. So what I've said to people, because I have people who say, well, it's been a great year for me. And I'm like, and they feel guilty about it. I've always felt that guilt is only functional if it creates the desire to make a change. Otherwise, it's something you kind of like play around in because you don't want to do anything. So guilt can have a function. If you've had a great year this year, then I hope you can lean into your gratitude and out of your gratitude into your generosity. Because there are people who need us to be generous right now. So if it's been a great year for you, celebrate that. I don't think you need to live with guilt. I think you need to live with a sense of generosity. And what can you do for somebody else? However, if it has been a year for you of profound suffering and loss, then I believe you need to learn find ways to soothe yourself. Reach out for help. It is not some kind of award for how much you can do on your own. There's not a medal for that. I see so many people who won't refuse to ask for any help. I think it comes from different places. So some people don't want to ask for help because they don't feel like they deserve it. And that is something I challenge. I challenge it because even if you don't deserve to reach out, your reaching out often heals other people. How many times has someone been helped by being asked for help? So equity, I say equity because I'm saying that there has not been equity, and yet our work is to reach for equity, to have that hope, and to find out ways to work through your suffering. I spent so much time thinking about suffering. Suffering was really what called me into ministry, and it's a whole lot more than we can ever talk to here. How am I doing? I'm okay. 20. I'm 7. Okay, keep going because I haven't even gotten to my third bad anagram. So those are my first two: H for hope, E for equity, and in the middle of equity, a lot more about suffering. I do think that guilt is easier to feel than helplessness. And that a lot of times when people come to me and they just feel guilty, 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 I really want to explore with them. Tell me about your helplessness. Tell me about feeling out of control. Tell me about uncertainty. Because guilt has a sense of I'm in control. Because if I'm all bad, at least I'm in control. So anyway, so my third part of my bad anagram is alternation. And this is a really bad one, but I'm going to go into some. So what I mean by alternation is that I think our bodies heal by going back and forth between touching into our pain and coming out of it. Remember when I started, I said I'd like for you to stay at about a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10. We can only heal at a low level of challenge. And this is true for wound healing as well. This is even true for plants. Plants don't grow out of their woody parts. They grow out of their soft parts. I think we're the same way. I think we grow and we heal out of that place at about a 4 out of 10. And most people are over challenged. So when I say alternation, I'm really thinking in terms of what we know about trauma and how we heal from trauma. You know, trauma is just a word for wound. But what we're talking about oftentimes when we talk about trauma is emotional wounds that overwhelm our current coping capacity. And what we know about trauma from Van der Kolk, from there's so many wonderful resources I could throw out here, but that what we have to do is, with enough social support, we have to allow people to face all that has hurt them and then move away. So it's really going a little in and out with support, with a holding environment, with a structure around you, so you know you can't go too deep. And then the last part of my bad anagram is levity. Okay, so I think that we have to have, in the middle of all the suffering, we have to have a sense of humor. We have to have some ability to feel and expand our joy and our pleasure. I think pleasure's gotten a bad name. And I often, what I want to do when I'm working with someone who's hurting a lot is I want to try to hear the hurt. And I also want to find at least a neutral place in them in the moment that we can expand and invite them to kind of soften up around all their hurt and to kind of like lean into even the tiniest bit of joy. We cannot move forward without some sense of, you know, this kind of like enjoying pleasure, levity, funny. And I think art is a place where we play. I am an artist. It saves my life. It's all around me. You know, we're having a great Artist Day of Healing, by the way, if you haven't heard about it. But on Saturday all day, I've got a bunch of artists getting together, doing it, you know, contributing a day of healing. And so, and I probably said enough. It's 7:23. How are we doing? I could talk forever. So I'll finish because Rabbi Asher said I had 5 minutes. Can I, you know, do I have 5 minutes? Okay, good. Because I didn't even get to part of what I was going to talk about. Because a couple of people came to mind as I was talking, and one was Amanda Gorman. who gives me so much hope. She's the 22-year-old, she's the poet laureate that spoke at the inauguration. And I love what she said. While we might feel small, separate, and all alone, our people have never been more closely tethered. And also, for it's our grief that gives us our gratitude and shows us how to find hope if we ever lose it. So ensure that this ache wasn't endured in vain. Do not ignore the pain. Give it purpose. Use it. And also from her poem, somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. I love that. And I've got other quotes from like Howard Thurman and other people that I think, just kind of repeat what I've said. I could go on, but I appreciate this opportunity to kind of explore with you some of my thoughts on healing the body. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. And we now take an opportunity to hear from Rabbi Miriam Klotz.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Knight, and thank you, Reverend Hasty. I really appreciate learning from you and with you, and found myself resonating with so much of what you said. I'm grateful to be with all y'all tonight. If you hear any redundancy in what you've heard just a little, few minutes ago, please forgive me. A lot of wisdom. So what I'd like to share with you as I was thinking about tonight, first of all, a little bit of background, how I come to be here this evening and how I have had a very interesting and unpredicted rabbinate so far in my lifetime for about 2 decades. I never anticipated or kind of planned methodically that I would be focusing a bunch of my rabbinical, I'm working with people, focusing on our physicality, on the body. However, because there were no conventional pathways towards working with from within Jewish life, Jewish spiritual life, working with our bodies and through our bodies intentionally. However, I came into my desire to, or calling to, or yearning to become a rabbi from the perspective of studying a bit of theology, religious studies as an undergraduate, and then studying photography and creative writing, and doing some other things after like that, creative endeavors after undergraduate school, that kept bringing me back to some writings which said we can't know God, we can't fully, deeply, intimately know God by whatever name, conceiving of something greater than ourselves, bigger than the boundaries of our own edges of our skin that we're connected to, if we bypass our own experience. It says in the book of Job, "From my flesh I see God." And I am in part kind of emotionally and spiritually and potentially therefore abstractly inclined, but I'm also kind of hyper literal in a certain way. And I took some of these teachings really literally to heart, that I might know about the universe, meaning and purpose, who I am as incarnated as a Jewish person in this lifetime. If I stay true to and link my experience to the authentic moment by moment life I was actually living. And that brought me to the path of the body as source of healing, and also of spiritual awareness, and illumination over the course of a life. And I began to look toward Jewish sources. On the one hand, look to the Jewish sources for where could I lift up a sense of bodily awareness. What was a Jewish approach to being in our bodies and making a life of meaning through and with our bodies? And then on the other hand, I was exploring and learning, steeping myself in what I've come to know retroactively as practice, as daily practice, linking my attention, training my awareness to stay in the body, stay in the awareness of what was happening, whether it felt pleasant or unpleasant, boring or fantastic, just to notice what in fact I was feeling and experiencing. And and I did discover that as I deepened in the practices of yoga and body work through massage and massage training, body therapies like shiatsu and a few other things I explored a little bit here and there, and then deepened in my practices further still by becoming a yoga teacher and a yoga therapist and working through through those practices with myself and with others, relating, from the physical level for the sake of healing. I found that through the body, there were teachings, there was wisdom about life. And I was actually finding out, discovering more about what I would come to understand for myself as an authentic approach to God. Again, um, the sacred dimension, by whatever name. There are many names for God in the Hebrew, in the Bible, and in the Jewish tradition. Um, the source of life. And like for one example, in the practice of yoga, so we can experiment with this just right now. Um, if you have a sense of somewhere in the body that feels constricted, and you might actually have that, but let's just experiment together for a minute. Like if you take your hands and make them into fists, right? You can come at life with your hands in tight fists. And also comes into your your daily experience with hands open, palms open. So you can practice just opening the palms, letting them be open. And you can let the hands be completely slack. You can let them rest on your lap or I'm resting my hands on the desk in front of me here, and let efforting go and see that the hands can be held. They can be supported by what's underneath them. And so I started to learn about something Reverend Hasty was referring to, about regulation, self-regulation. See, if we pick up our hands again, we have that whole range between, tight fists and completely open, and then somewhat in between. There's both fluidity and toning to the way we can move our hands. You can just experiment moving your hands, both with a kind of receptivity and softening, but also with some amount of muscular intention. You can practice like making your fingers really like stiff and hold them, or really soft, where however they want to naturally be. And so that's just one little example of, in the physical body, we can move from constriction to a more expansive range of possibilities. And I began to, as I thought about that and explored and studied a little bit, then the Jewish tradition, well, I saw that there could be spiritual concepts, healing concepts that could be extracted from the wisdom of this body. And in fact, I saw that in the Jewish rabbinic and mystical traditions, there are many places that show us that what's in the microcosm, like what's right here in our own hands, is also found in a fractal way, reflected in the macrocosm or the larger universe around us. In fact, there is on some level, in some way, no separation. So, for example, the story of one of the grounding stories in the Torah, is about Yetziat Mitzrayim, the leaving of Egypt, you know, when the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, and then they left. Long process of coming to leave, led by Moses, right? The support of the creator of the universe, says the story, God, and leaving that land of Egypt, which in Hebrew, Mitzrayim, Hebrew for Egypt, more literally means the land or place of constriction. So the story of coming to liberation or freedom, to full healing, could be in one sense understood right here, and well, where you might feel constriction in your body, and you might be guided to be able to cultivate conditions in which you experiment with being in a different way, seeing options, experiencing options for more expansiveness. And so this is for a life, kind of a life lesson of how one might go through a life, or at least I found it instructional, important, and there was some wisdom in it. So I kept pursuing what I could discover by working with this body and working with others as a teacher of body awareness, or like one might say, teaching meditation, training and working with the mind, as I believe y'all did last week. So working with the somatics or body-based practices, there's a somatic practitioner, Christine Caldwell, and she's coined a term for working to increase awareness through our bodies. From my flesh, I see God. That's not her term. I'm just referring us back to that verse in the book of Job. But the phrase or the term she's coined is called bodyfulness. And I'm so struck by that. It's cute, it's clever, but the way she defines it is that bringing awareness to a sense of being fully present in the body, in your body, right now, as just as you are, is a way to bring deep attention, presence, and aliveness to this moment. That if you think about the absence of that, bodilessness, a kind of bypass where we disassociate or distance from our bodies, we might live up in our heads and just think about stuff, or spiritualize things away. And then it's just some things that Reverend Hasty was alluding to earlier, but that getting proximate to, getting close to what we're actually feeling in the body, in our bodies, and working with our bodies in a way with kindness and curiosity. This allows us the greatest freedom in a life to make wise choices, to make loving choices, and in fact, to actually experience love and being alive in the fullness of the range of what we can feel and know. And so let's see, there's so much I'd like to share with you, but I thought in a sort of brief way, as I was reflecting on it, the arc of a life, of when we're young, and when we then as if we're blessed to grow into midlife and farther on in our years, through our bodies, we know that we'll have times of wellness, and then we'll have times of suffering, of illness, of injury, of loss. And so how we work with this physical body over the course of whatever time we have to live in these impermanent bodies, there's a way of tending, a way of being. And I thought about a few touch points for me in my own practice where I've integrated body awareness practice, some kind of physical practice, and touchstones from the Jewish tradition that speak to me, and I'd like share them with you in the hopes that maybe some of it will be of interest, or maybe helpful, or provocative anyway, to start kind of thinking about some of this stuff. But the proof is in the pudding, in your own experience, in each of our own experience. So don't take my word for it, but this is what I'd like to share with you from my experience. Um, the first thing is an experiential belief in Judaism. I find in Jewish tradition, and it's found in the daily prayer book, in the morning prayers, and it says that creation is renewed every day in goodness. Every single day we're alive. B'chol yom tamid. The in goodness, the Creator mechadesh renews all of creation, and this daily renewal can extrapolate. I can say, well, every moment, in a sense, is renewed, and reminding ourselves of this, at least for me, creates space around a sense of there's always potential to begin again. So, being human, if I mess up in one moment, if I forget myself in one moment, in other words, my thoughts get ahead of the truth of my experience. If I act hastily or I find myself being reactive, um, some of the trauma-filled um, moments and events and cumulative impact of this past year, as um, Reverend Hasty has, really courageously and forthrightly brought to our attention, lest we try to dodge, which, but sometimes, you know, if I've dodged for a moment because it's too much, oh, the next moment is a brand new moment. Creation is really new, and I can be really new. And, thinking about our bodies, I am not a scientist, I'm not a nurse, but as a yoga teacher, what I have learned is literally the cells, the very stuff that make up our body, our cells, our tissues, our organs, the systems that interact with each other. All of this um, dies and is reborn many times in the course of our life, our lifetime as a whole. And so again, from micro to macro, the opportunity to renew, to be born again, and to hold loss and even death within a whole context of ongoing renewal of creation in the cycle of birth, becoming, and dying. And I see that we can do that with any movement. So, like, I was going to invite us into a little bit of a breath meditation, but I'd like to build on what we did a little while ago, with the beautiful just coming into our bodies and breathing meditation. I'd like to now add a little movement to that to bring us into our bodies. If you'd like to join me, of course, it's your choice. But if you'd like to and you're able to, just going to invite you again to bring awareness into your hands, and even take a look down at your hands, and from there your arms. And so with awareness, you can take your arms out to the sides, or if you don't have space out to your sides, you can do this bringing your arms in front of you. And we're just going to practice linking a simple movement in just a moment of raising our arms up, linking this to our attention, like we might follow a movement of a breath. We're going to follow with the breath. We're going to, as we inhale, let's lift our arms up and let your eyes follow the hands. And then as you exhale, keep your eyes watching your hands, extend the arms and descend. And again, inhale and watch, be aware, feel the arms lifting. See your hands and arms as your breath leaves the body, descend. We'll do this one more time. And just notice, let any other thoughts go. Just let yourself feel, watch, breathe, and move at your own pace. And as you complete that cycle of breath and bring the hands down, just notice what might be, what you might, what you're experiencing in the body and your emotions and your thoughts now. That was a whole life cycle of a movement from start to finish. And healing comes, it's not the same as curing, but healing of the body. I think a Jewish approach, one Jewish kind of way of holding that is that when we bring our attention fully present to the present moment, we stay with whatever it is that we're experiencing through movement in our body, the movement of an emotion as sensation through the body. That sense of full presence, bodyfulness, is in itself healing. We can't control the curing of the body. Medical science is capable of so many miracles, but we can't control ultimately the curing, but healing, I believe, and my experience has shown me more and more over the years to be true. In my experience, that healing, refuat haguf, healing of the body, can happen most fully when we simply allow ourselves to be present to what is truly happening in the body, in the moment. So when we're in states of wellness, we can be moving consciously through practices like walking, dancing, any kind of stretching that moves the body in its aliveness and helps with circulation and muscular strength and flexibility and toning and all of that, and sleeping and enjoying the food, actually tasting the food that we eat, um, tasting the beverages that we drink, smelling the scents that we actually have around us to smell, seeing what it is that's actually in front of us, those of us blessed with sight, physical sight, actually hearing ourselves, hearing what it is that we hear, bringing the sensory awareness and our capacities to move. And then we can further experience that aliveness and that healing, renewing capacity from moment to moment by further practices like yoga is one, qigong, tai chi, many kinds of movement practices, uh, um, exercising like on a treadmill or an elliptical machine. As long as we're paying attention, it's all, and we're not harming ourselves because we're pushing beyond our capacity. That is a kind of constricted state that would have us push beyond the body's wise capacity of any given moment. But all of these things help cultivate aliveness and the gift of being in this body as we're alive. But then there's what happens when we're in the experience of rupture, when we're not well. If a loved one or us, you yourself might experience illness, injury, or other kinds of physical hardship. Grief is certainly a physically felt hardship. So, what in Jewish tradition helps, have I found, truly, truly is there, like when when it really matters. Is it the phrase that when the rubber hits the road, like when it really counts? I'd like to share with you a story. A colleague of mine, a rabbi, and his wife lost their son suddenly. Was tragically one morning 10 years ago. He was a healthy, vibrant 16-year-old in the shower one morning, no known illnesses or conditions, nothing. In the shower, getting ready to go to school. And his parents thought, well, it's taking a little longer than usual. Hey, calling up the stairs, it's time. You come on down and get some breakfast. Not a word, not a peep. So another few minutes went by, and my friend walked up the stairs and heard the shower, peeked in the door, and had the unthinkable, unbearable experience you can anticipate probably. His son had collapsed. There had been a congenital heart defect hadn't been detected, and he was he had already died. So we should, we say, and there's like a kind of folk, we should never know. Poo, 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 poo. You should never know from such, and you shouldn't, except it's part of human experience. Some of us here in this chat, this Zoom space together might have had such horrific experiences, or others on that end of the scale. Now, I have to invoke what Reverend Hasty also said. If this is triggering, if this is uncomfortable for you, and you need to take a step away for a minute, please do. If you need to turn off the sound for a minute, please do. Okay. I'm in complete agreement about that 4, on the scale of pleasure and discomfort. But I mentioned this story not to be dramatic, but to say these things which seem dramatic sometimes do happen in the course of living, as horrific as they and inexplicable as they are, and they throw us right into the mystery of the unknown. How in the world could a loving God allow such a thing to happen, right? So here's what I want to say. I don't have the magic answer to that, but I do have the following to offer. I went to the funeral for this young man, and his father, my friend, colleague, and at the time also student. When our eyes met, he came as his rabbi yoga teacher, and we were practicing Jewish spiritual practices in a retreat program together for clergy. So there was a context for what I'm about to share with you, but we hugged, and I felt the trembling in his body as the parent who just was enduring probably one of the worst day of his life. And he whispered into my ear, "Thank God for the practice. Thank God for the practices. It's the only thing. That's what I'm leaning into right now." And we've talked about it since. What he meant was the practice that brought him back into his body. At the time, it was yoga, but yoga schmoga on a certain level doesn't matter. It's not about a yoga pose. It's about some practice that anchors you so that you can feel even when it's so hard to feel. Develop a capacity to be with, not abandon your own experience, no matter what it is. No matter what it is. And I believe it also, and he's said it allowed him to, the practice enabled him to soften, to let support in from others, from other family members, from his community, from friends near and far. That practice to soften begins also sometimes with that as simple as, wow, I can soften my hands. So there is a verse that is from Psalm 23, and I think of this often as a mantra in a sense, or not an acronym, but it's a hook for me, and I offer it in case it might be helpful for you. Says, even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, Gam ki elech beget salmavet, Lo ira ra. I will not let fear get the best of me. Ki ata imadi, because you are with me. And it's that last part that I want to lift up for us. Ki ata imadi, for you are with me. Classical religious translation might be because but you, God, are with me. But I want to invite also the possibility that the ata, which is the Hebrew for you, could also be you as the self, you as your own self, with your own self, um, staying with your experience, even through the valleys. Um, and when we can stay with the breath, stay with the truth of our experiences, we experience a kind of healing that enables us to feel fear, feel responses to the most horrific moments, and stay present. Um, and and that the daily practices that help us renew our sense of connection to our own experience give us the bandwidth. It's like a musician in the symphony practicing their scales, daily, so that when time comes that they're needed to do, um, Beethoven's Ninth, whatever it may be. Musicians, classical musicians in particular amongst us, forgive me for whatever it may be, when we practice daily staying in touch with what we're feeling, what our bodies are experiencing, we have half a chance and more of staying present to ourselves through all of our experiences, which is enable, which is, and from a Jewish perspective, enabling us to be thoughtful about how we respond to what is beyond our control in life, to make wise and loving choices. Um, so I'm imagining that I might be pretty close to time here. Okay, so I think what I'd like to yeah, I think maybe that's a good place to stop. Well, can I say just one sentence? Okay, so one sentence, shortest prayer in the Torah. Um, Moses says on behalf of his sister Miriam, when she is stricken with the skin, some say leprosy, whatever it may be, is some kind of disease on the skin. Please, God, heal her now. Intending that same kind of presence for another being and showing up for others through prayer, through Bikur Halim, visiting with them, spending time with them, in the same way we would want to spend time with and cultivate being with our own experience. That's healing. And that's the longest one sentence anybody maybe spoke. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have an opportunity to invite you to ask questions. By all means, you can ask questions in the chat box. You can also ask questions to ask me a question, and that will help. Matt Kelly will help us to sort of coordinate this. I want to that image that you all created, and I'm going to actually ask Natalie if you can actually pin us up if that's helpful. Is that okay? Great, perfect. Thank you so much. So this image that you have of the closed fists and the open hands, such a beautiful image for what we've been holding with COVID. About the sort of recognition. I was noticing this the other day, where I went shopping to a grocery store, and I was masking up inside of my car in order to go into the grocery store, and looked at the car next to me, and there was an older couple who was there, who were going through every single motion of putting on gloves and doing the masks, and sort of and I was just sort of realizing that meant that every interaction going into that store was going to include the sort of closed fist reality. Does that make sense? And so I sort of wonder, there is a real physicality to what we've been having through COVID, and wondering about your sense about how what we do to sort of not only manage that, and but also how how we approached the world in a constant opening up and closing down and opening up and closing down, and just the exhaustion of that. So it's just interested in your thoughts, but not all at once. Definitely not all at once. You can unmute, and yeah, Miriam, do you want to go first?
I was going to suggest maybe Reverend Hasty, if you wanted to, Kathy, if you wanted to go, I'm happy to, but I just
Well,
spoke for her.
I loved your image out of Egypt as the land of constriction, and the image of the Egypt story of coming out of a land of constriction. But how do we focus on something you brought up that I brought up was that how do we soften and ask for help? I have seen that we have to be more demonstrative now than ever before because people can't see as much of us. So with my eyes, I have to really reach out with some softening. And yet people are so hungry. Have you noticed that, Asher, is how hungry people are for some sense of connection? That old couple in the other chair, in the other car. When people, I'm finding people want to be reached out to and to be kind of softly, gently cared for. I loved a lot of what you said, Mary. It was just so beautiful. And I wrote down a lot of notes about the kindness, curiosity. Don't we need so much more kindness and curiosity right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And the response that I was actually that came up for me in response to your question, Asher, is really practicing the kindness and getting curious, like what's happening in our own bodies when we're masking up, and like there is that vigilance that is. There's this phrase in Hebrew, pikuach nefesh, saving life for the sake of preserving life, which is a sacred gift to be embodied, right? So for the sake of being, we have to be vigilant. This is not getting into. This is talking on a somatic level,
Mhm.
right? So I find with being careful, sometimes my body can get really tense, right? And so I practice like a lot of deep breaths. Oh, put the mask on, and I notice if try to pay attention to am I breathing? Is my breathing getting shallow? And then take that deep breath. Or if I notice my shoulders are kind of creeping up towards my ears, because right, like, oh, like, so really, relaxing any places I come to notice that feel tension, and being compassionate with like noticing the efforting it takes. Like I love the eye softening and awareness that we went through in the beginning, that you took us through, Kathy. It's so like how true, like we're straining even right now with screens, never mind when we're out in the public sphere. So being compassionate with how much effort, and letting ourselves rest, and and be in some way we can let down that constriction because of necessity. We're picking it up again in some ways, as we go out now.
Well, I think what's also beautiful, so beautiful about what the two of you have said, is that it's not one way to view it is how am I protecting myself, but another way of view it is I value the other so much, right? That through valuing the other, I am choosing a physical choice of masking, or just taking care of my personal space in order to value your life. And by shifting it that in that way too, it can give you hope. it can, you know, it can give you gratitude for the people who are around you.
Yeah, it's a reframing.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Mary, I love you coming back into the practices and that we have to build habits, what you're calling practices and I call habits. Um, uh, and at first, they don't always feel good. I have an image of the first time when I was having to learn how to eat wheat bread. You know, I like white bread. I grew up in the South, and you know, a banana sandwich on white bread, and you know, I had to, and I remember how much I didn't like wheat bread at first, and I think of that as the practices. Maybe you can speak to this, but sometimes early the practices don't that are going to sustain us don't initially feel good, you know, and now I can't stand white bread, but it took me a long time. And I think prayer is a practice like that, that when we first learn to pray, it's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily give us, you know, we keep thinking, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Are you sure this is the best it gets? You know, but it's that you do it over and over and you develop a capacity to do it when you need it most. I loved your story because I think it's like I'm relying on what I have come to rely on. And you know, our community is not there for us unless we're there for our community, which is one of our practices. Being in the community is one of our practices. And so I don't know. I love that part of what you're saying. I think it's very important.
No, there's a it's so fascinating that that two-way street is really is so important, right? And the recognition that there are times where we absolutely need the community to be present for us, and at the same time it must be a two-way street, in part also because if you expect community to be present ultimately for you, you need to be present for, you know, those in the community. It is a really it is a practice, and part of that is also the sort of sense of what am I receiving, right, versus and what am I giving. And I'm that's actually a great, you know, part of the question is how does the role of giving, right, of yourself also help with the role of healing. Kathy, I think you're muted.
I know. Why don't you take that, Marina?
Oh, well, I was actually thinking back to your acronym. And when and then, you know, when speaking about guilt and the kind of composting of guilt towards gratitude, and let gratitude then compost further into some kind of giving, whatever it may be. I thought that was really beautiful and instructive. Like whatever the guilt and also could be other kind of like just ruminations, you know, where the mind keeps focusing on whatever it is, and we're becoming more internal, that and you know, like as physical pain sometimes does. But you know, I think of Dr. Dan Gottlieb. He's a quadriplegic. He's a therapist, and he was in a car accident, became a quadriplegic, and he was on the brink of suicide. He talks about this. And actually, if y'all who are nodding who know this, if I'm remembering this incorrectly, please correct me. Somebody asked, I think another patient in the hospital, or somebody asked him for help. They were in a great deal of emotional agony, and it was being called out of himself to give his presence to another person that brought him back from the brink and showed him, helped him find meaning in that moment, and then brought him out from the brink of actually wanting to take his life. And he's devoted his life since then. You know, he's a tremendously gifted and generous with his wisdom, you know, and presence, psychotherapist, teacher, you know, talk show host, and he's a quadriplegic. And boy, the giving is, and he talks about this often, as far as I read and hear him. It's that capacity to give that gives him the strength. And I think it helps us get beyond our limited perspective that we're alone.
And, you know, loneliness is a big killer. It's actually more like correlated with death than heart disease and cancer. And that's why the community practice of being in a community, the practice, you know, loneliness, isolation, are killers. And some of that loneliness does come from people not wanting to reach out and accept help. Um, People like you better when you ask something of them, actually. Wasn't it Benjamin Franklin who said that the way to recruit people was to ask a favor of them?
Hmm.
And they actually did some research and found that people tend to grew you more favorably if you've asked a small thing that they could actually give to you.
Hmm.
Isn't that fascinating?
The um the two of you talked about, I mean, the story of the Passover and coming out of the narrow place and coming into that sense of possibility. One of the texts that we read in the Jewish tradition at that time, in the season of the year, is actually the Ezekiel dry bones text, which had a lot of people probably feeling sort of uneasy about what kind of drugs Ezekiel might have been taking to have that vision. But there is this sort of, what's so interesting is that in that Ezekiel vision is this sort of actually the body sort of renewing renewing itself as the body of a people who needs to renew itself. And in that sort of daily renewing that happens, what kind of practices do the two of you employ in your lives that have helped you sort of have that renewal of body and that renewal of spirit that almost has to happen on a daily basis? Whether it's a habit or a practice that has really helped you to just renew towards from those narrow places towards an expansive possibility.
For mine, I have had a walk outside every day since COVID started, for about an hour every day, just to maintain being sane. I do think that some of our practices almost, they just barely keep me sane. I'm not saying I'm right in the middle of there, but I have to paint something, I have to draw something, I have to walk outside every day, and friends, I think, have kept me alive too. But many practices, I feel like my whole day is full of practices.
Well, I think I'm just going to be redundant. Similarly, it's true. It feels like this time is calling, in my experience, calling us to make of our lives practice, 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 come present. For me, even when I wake up first thing, the first 10 minutes is, you mentioned, I mentioned at the very tail end of when I was, and sharing, and then you brought it back up, Kathy, the practice or habit of prayer. For me, that starts with, there's one Jewish prayer to say first thing in the morning, just thanking the Creator for, like, oh, I'm alive. I'm alive today. I woke up. Thank you so much. And I will actually do a body scan. Like, I'll do a meditation and just check out, how's the body feeling today? And if there are places of tension, then I'm aware of them. And how's the energy feel? Oh, feeling, well, feels pretty okay today. Oh, there's that shoulder thing right now. Okay, breathe into it. Be aware of it today, or at least right now. Like a check-in, and that's really when I start. It sort of it sets my executive functioning in my mind connected to my body, and that is really. I'm much more, there's a greater chance I'll have a better day and make fewer silly mistakes and say the wrong things to people and all that kind of stuff if I've had that little bit of set time in the morning. And nature, being outside if we can, connecting with the bigger sky and really feeling the air, whatever, outside, and creativity, also finding some time to draw or write or paint. Or for me also, if I don't have a lot of time, I'll also put on my little headphone, my earbuds. I have a 19-year-old son who's home now doing schooling online, and he would not like his mom, singing along, or like any kind of music but I dance. I'll put on Spotify or iTunes or some music on my, whatever the technology, find some music just to move around and experience. And I tell you, it is renewing. And if it's been a particularly hard day, I need to do that particularly that much more.
You know,
When I
it's
remember.
So true.
well, it's so funny because what's interesting is that for me, and I have a puppy that may have made some noises, so she's feeling very very constricted right now. But the one of the things that I've really noticed is during COVID has been um how aware I am of the season. That I felt like I was seeing every single bud of a tree sort of come into blossom, into fruition, and how we saw and felt the summer, and how we felt the fall, and how and it's not like Charlotte is, we have seasons here. It's not like we don't have seasons, but it's not as probably as severe as other places. But we just really feeling and aware of every single change, the change of the seasons, and of light, of the moon, and nighttime and daytime. It has been fundamentally important to, I think, my own sense of awareness and healing. I do wonder, as we sort of talk about our bodies and healing bodies. There's a last question. This is not a great last question, but there are also a lot of people who are uncomfortable in their bodies, right? And sort of, who are just, really uncomfortable in their own skin, and don't feel, I used to joke that as I was the kid in playing sports, that I was the kid who was chasing the kid who was chasing the kid with the ball. Like that was me with sports, right? So recognizing that, like, what is your approach when you're talking to people who don't feel as comfortable with their own body, from this outset?
You want me to start? You want to go?
Sure.
Please go ahead. I'd be happy
Um,
for you to start. I'm happy.
yeah, I think what I just want to say is that everyone has some discomfort with their body. I think we, as a culture, I can speak about Christianity, we have done just a rotten job. I don't think Jesus was necessarily as alienated from Jesus's body, because Jesus was a good Jew as far as I'm concerned. And I just feel like the Hebrew tradition has done a better job of not being so split between mind, body, and spirit. So if you have some discomfort for your body, welcome to the world. I mean, it's almost like we have to embrace our discomfort and say it's okay to kind of like start just wherever you are with just the smallest amount of movement, and then kind of find somebody who might be just 2 inches along the way, that you kind of can see that they move more easily, or that they aren't as constricted. Isn't this constriction in the body? So we're trying to just don't be so hard on yourself. Just that little piece, whatever that little next step is to be loving of yourself, would be kind of what I would say first.
I concur, and I would just with the particular kind of Rahmanis, kind of vernacular Jewish for compassion. Um, there's a lot of intergenerational Jewish trauma being in our bodies that many of us have inherited as Ashkenazi Jews, and certainly Jews of color, with racialized trauma and Jewish trauma. So any small act of kindness that interrupts that pattern of 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 um, not of the constriction, not feeling safe in the body, not feeling like it's okay to have to actually drop down and be, with sensory awareness, and feel the feelings in the belly, feel the feet on the floor, see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing, etc. Like it's bit by bit, step by step, and we help give each other permission and encouragement. Like, yes, those stories, I certainly have stories growing up as a tomboy in Atlanta. um, tomboy, you know, and a Jewish person at a predominantly not Jewish school. Oh, there was like a lot of, and we each, I would bet, or many of us have stories, and it's like compassionately, but kind of like firmly too, like challenging. Well, just because is it really, does that really mean it's true? Maybe that's not the real story of who I am in this body. Yeah. So healing.
Which is allows you to redefine yourself and define yourself by who you are. You've given us so much to think about this evening, and as if I yelp, it's because I'm being gnawed upon by my puppy who's 17 weeks old, and has decided that at this very moment she needs to absolutely gnaw on my hand. It is just so I'm so grateful, Reverend Hasty and Rabbi Klotz, to have you both here with us, to share your wisdom with us. Next week with comparative religion, we're concluding with the healing of the soul, and we have also three great speakers. Dr. Nabil Elias, who's actually here this evening, and we're so grateful to have him with us from the Baha'i tradition. Bishop Rawls, who's going to be with us as well. Tanya Rawls and Hannah Hassan will be with us as well next week. So from the Muslim tradition. So we are so grateful to have the two of you here with us to share your wisdom. Thank you, and we'll conclude our series next Tuesday evening with also more great speakers. Thank you both. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.